thought it'd be great to have Tim explain a little bit more about his background and who he is and what he does. And then we're going to dive into how we met and how we're starting to work together on something.
Yeah. So my name is Tim Yeo. I've been a designer and a design leader for the last 20 years. And half of my journey has been spent in consulting, and the other half I spent working in house, most of that time in startups, in meeting rooms and teams with a lot of people with strong opinions and loud
Mhm.
voices.
Yeah.
Um, my whole life, I've always felt like I was quieter in nature. I was originally from Singapore, but I moved to Australia about 12 years ago.
Hmm.
And it was quite a jarring experience being coming from Asia, being a Asian environment, coming to a Western environment. There were small things like
Right.
how to make small talk, how to network. The way that people
Sure.
behaved was quite different. Even though Singapore is a cosmopolitan city where we have people from
Hmm.
all around the world, but living in a place with Western culture, Western norms, Western behaviors, it was quite jarring. And to have
Yeah.
that every day, all the time, especially in the workplace, it was quite challenging. My story was last year I published a book. It was called The Quiet Achiever. I collected all of the tiny habits that I learned and practiced through my career about how to have impact at work without pretending to be an extrovert. Because for a long
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
I pretended. I
Yeah. Me
pretended to
too.
be an extrovert because that was the only picture of what a leader looked like. That was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
If you want to be a
Yeah.
leader, you got to be Mel Gibson in Braveheart, riding out on your horse in front of your
Right.
troops,
Right.
giving a speech at the drop of a hat. And that
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
picture of what a leader looked like to me. So I pretended and it worked, but I
Hmm.
was exhausted. And
Yeah. Yeah.
then, I started thinking maybe it's me, maybe I'm not good enough. And then I realized it's only when I hit rock bottom that, you know what, all these other things that I was doing, um, networking one on one, being able to have one on ones with my bosses, being able to
Right.
facilitate meetings, practicing public speaking well before the meeting so that when it comes
Hmm.
showtime, I can perform. Doing all these things, I put all the things that I learned of how to have impact as a quiet person into the book. And then that also has become courses. I also do coaching. In a nutshell, that's my story. How
Yeah.
just because you're quiet doesn't mean that you've got nothing to say. I want to, in some ways, show people that there's a different picture of what leadership could look like, in
Right.
whatever it
Right.
is your role that you do.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. And there are a lot of introverted people have been fantastic leaders. I think not enough of them have been held up as role models. And everything you described, very true in the US too. If you're going to be a leader, you got to be bold, confident, cocky. You always raise your hand, you always speak up, you argue with everyone. And so my story is very similar to Tim's that I was in tech for like 20 some years too. And now I'm a coach. But I pretend to be an extrovert so I could move into leadership and do public
Hmm.
speaking and get aggressive and be an executive. And like Tim said, it works, especially in those cultures, like an American culture, very much Silicon Valley, very much. But it's draining. It's draining. So I had to learn a bunch of strategies of how to recover and give myself time that I needed. Um, and then I think finding my way into a career path and independence that allows me to be who I am, which is more introverted. And I do need time to recharge. And I agree with Tim. I think, Susan Cain talks about this too, that there's a power that introverts have and a lot of natural skills that we have that aren't celebrated enough. And I think it
Mm,
is the quiet thinking, is giving other people a voice, which we do too. We're like, hey, Susan hasn't had a chance to say anything. Let's hear what she says, because the extroverts will just dominate the meeting. So I think actually introverts make fantastic leaders because we want to lift other people up, and we recognize when there
mm,
are people in the meeting who are not being heard that are
mm,
smart and should be heard, and we recognize what they need, which is time to think and process and maybe share information in different formats. Like, hey, send it in a written report or an email. Maybe you don't want to stand up in front of the room, but
mm,
your words should still be heard. So we met, I think, on Twitter when it was still Twitter. Uh,
Mm.
I think that's where Tim and I met, and we kind of bonded over this concept of introversion and careers and coaching and how to be different and recognize that people need help navigating their careers. They need help navigating these cultures. So we've been talking on and off for years. I had Tim on the show, like I said, I think last year. And then this year, we're both solopreneurs, but we said, hey, let's find a way to work together. And so we started planning a course to address this very issue of how do quiet, humble people get heard? How do they
Mm.
get a chance to learn how to speak up and ask for a raise, ask for a promotion, do it in a way that seems authentic? How do they interview well? How do they stay off the layoff list? So that's all the stuff we've been talking about.
Mm.
Um, and I'm sure Tim's seen this with his clients too, the kind of things that they're struggling with.
Mm. And for me, it's very personal because how many times, how many of the people listening to this podcast have been in a position where, in their own minds, they feel like they have the best idea, but we know that in the places that we work, the best ideas don't always win. When
Right,
you
right,
are interviewing for a role and there are many other candidates out there, you're the one that's quieter in nature. Your work is brilliant. Everyone says your work is brilliant. But then you are always looked over. You're not the one that's promoted. You're not the one that gets the role. Maybe it's somebody else. Maybe it's somebody else that you think
right,
is not as good, but maybe they show up differently. Maybe they are
right,
louder. Maybe they have a bit more presence that apparently you don't have. How many times you then find yourself in the same role, stuck because you can't find
right.
something
Yeah,
else up the career ladder, even though you think you fully deserve it, and you probably do. I've been that person. The people that I work with, the people that I coach, they are in that right now. And I
right,
think it's a personal journey for me because I've been through it. I understand the suffering, the self blame, the self doubt that maybe I'm not good enough. How you turn a lot of that energy inwards rather than outwards just because you're
mm-hmm.
quiet. And I wanted to make, I think, in some ways, with the Quiet Achiever, with this thing that you and I are making together in my coaching, is a personal journey because these are people that I would love to help, the people who feel
Right.
stuck,
Yeah,
to try and help them get the jobs that they deserve because they do. But just because they are quieter, because they don't know how to ask for more money, how to show up as the best version of themselves, just because of that, they don't get the roles that they really deserve. So
right.
my hope is that with, in some ways, the things that you and I are making, because both of us have shared these struggles before, I want to give people like us that unfair advantage. I want to give them that unfair advantage. All these
Sure.
things
Yeah.
that has helped
We're in their
us, help
corner.
you,
Yeah.
and hopefully they can make something out of it. Because if you really think about it, what Larry and I have done, we've taken all of our secrets, all of the things that we've done, we've really thought about it, and we put it into this one thing, this one course, um, and we try to make it as simple to apply as possible. Um, so that you today, if you want to make a difference in your career, you want to be able to stand up and be seen. These are simple things that you can do. And some of these
Right.
things are not things that you do every single day. Like how do you
Right.
ask for a
Yeah.
raise? It's super awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you how do you interview for a role where there might be a skill that you kind of know how to do, but you're a fast learner, but you don't have the evidence yet to do it? How do you show up?
Right.
How
Right.
do you show up in? How do you talk about your successes, which on paper they are out of this world, but maybe you're not selling it well enough to stand out. In some ways, I suppose I learned this the hard way. You learned this the hard way, and we just
Hmm.
don't want
Yeah.
people to learn the hard way anymore. We're hoping that we can
Right.
take all of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Life with AI and everything else that's happening in the world right now is hard enough, and we just want to make it
Right.
easier
Right.
and give you the unfair advantage, so that you can stand up and stand out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We can't ignore what's happening in the world right now. That um, especially if you work in tech, but not even tech. I mean, it's the ripple effects are hitting pretty much every industry, every type of corporation doing any kind of business. Just like tech kind of infiltrated every business, AI is infiltrating every business. So we have kind of the perfect storm of AI everywhere and getting much better. It used to be kind of a joke how bad it was. That was even
Mm,
last year. I'd look at output and be like, how silly, the way it would write things or interpret things. I've looked at the growth in the last 3 months of quality. I'm like, oh, this is getting really good, really good.
mm,
The political stuff in the US that we're seeing, I know some of that's happening in other places too, and it's affecting the economy. So, what I'm seeing, and I'm not deep in Silicon Valley, I'm in California now, but I am still coaching a ton of people in tech in Silicon Valley and mostly Americans, but some other people in other parts of the world, Europe, Asia, and so forth. Um, it's slowing down. So a lot of companies are shedding talent. They're laying off people. They're
mm,
not rehiring because they're worried about the economy. So they're being cautious. AI is definitely a factor. We saw the Duolingo CEO talk about it. The
mm,
Shopify CEO talked about it. A lot of people are saying, hey, maybe we won't be hiring as many people because we can use AI for these entry level positions.
mm,
And I'm seeing that companies are not hiring as many entry level engineers, designers, product people. Tim has seen this in Australia, and I'm seeing it here where kind of in the US, it's the middle management layer. So a lot of expensive
mhm,
people. So not the tip top executives, but the kind of middle management, director, that kind of stuff are being let go. Some of
mm,
that, whether they will admit it or not, I know it's true. There's age discrimination going on. So there's some ageism. Some of it's the cost. Those folks in the
mhm,
middle are pretty expensive compared to people that are a little more junior. Tim, you're seeing in Australia where expensive, quote,
mm,
expensive senior leaders are being let go and they're making do with the people that they have
mm,
left.
mm,
Um, I'm seeing a lot of companies saying, well, we'll have a senior engineer or a senior product person use AI and do the work of 10 people. So they
mm,
used to orchestrate like 10 junior PMs or 10 junior engineers. Well, now they're not going to. And
mm,
so all of this is causing a compression where there is a risk and you may see it in your company. And what you don't want to do is wait until you find out you're on the layoff list. So there are layoffs happening. If
mhm,
you're looking to make a move or you're out of work and looking for a job, it's getting harder. I know
mm,
people have been out of work for over a year now.
mm,
Fewer jobs, more competition, and you have to stand out more if you want to stay in your role. But all the stuff that's going on with the economy and the inflation means if you're not getting a raise or a promotion, you're effectively getting a demotion. Your
mm,
your salary's getting cut. I've talked about this before. It's like if the cost of everything goes up, but your salary stays the same, that's like getting your wages cut. It's like
mm,
so you have to ask for the promotion. You have to ask for the raise.
mm,
And that's why we created this course is that we know that's hard. The extroverts and the people who love to do this kind of stuff, they don't come to us. They don't ask for help because they're doing this all the time. I used to have people on my team that every one-on-one we had, they would say, "Okay, I want to hear what can I do? What can I take on in a project? What can I do to set myself up for a promotion? I want to get promoted."
mhm,
And then there
mhm,
were other people that never brought that up. And I
mm,
would have to ask them, are you thinking about a promotion? Would you be interested in taking on more responsibility?
mm,
They would never ask. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, but I didn't wanna ask." It's like so very different people. So I know a lot of you listening because the world isn't purely extroverted. And a lot of you listening didn't get promoted this year.
mm,
That's just the numbers, right? And I know a lot of you probably didn't get a raise this year. A lot of you may be wondering, should I get a better job? Do I need to get a job? I'm out of work. And you're thinking, well, how do I compete? How do I do this in a way that feels authentic to me and doesn't feel icky? That whole thing of like Tim said, trying to
mm,
be an extrovert and pretend to be what you're not. So there are ways to do this. And that's why we have this course that, like Tim said, we learned the hard way. So we want to share with you some strategies, some small things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing is a lot of this work is very fundamental to documenting and sharing your value and talking
Mm,
about the work instead of bragging about
mm,
yourself. And
mm,
that same work that you do to kind of showcase your work and talk about it and think about the value is good for everything. It's going to be what you
mm,
need to do for a raise, for a
mm,
promotion, to interview for a job, to show
mm,
your boss, "Hey, I'm doing amazing stuff for the company." And you don't have to say, "And I don't want to be on the layoff list," but you will be reminding them of your value, and so they will now say, "Oh, okay. I had no
mm,
idea that this person was doing so many wonderful things," and that's happened to me in my career where my manager said, "I had no idea you're at 60% of the stuff you were working on." I'm like, "Okay. I've got it. I learned this the hard way. I gotta get better at documenting and sharing my achievements and accomplishments and talking about the work, and that will save my job. That will
mm,
make me, like we call the course, they'll make me too valuable to lose. They will not want to lose me, and
mm,
that's kind of the key. That's why we named it that. It's a little strange, the name, but it is about making sure the people who are making decisions, whether it's a hiring manager or your manager or whoever's doing that, that they look at you and say, "This person is too valuable to lose. I have to keep them happy. I don't want to lay them off." Yeah.
mm. Yeah. Look, you're saying all the things that I feel as well. Um, I think when you and I were coming up with the idea of what to make, we didn't have a set idea, but somehow there was this magic that was at the intersection of interviews, promotions, and staying off the interviews list.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt like this was a timely topic. And for as long as your bosses are still humans, and for as long as your bosses are making hiring or firing decisions, I think this is where we can still help. Um,
Right.
you were talking about interviews earlier. How many times have you gone to an interview as an interviewer and then you start the interview with a seemingly harmless question like, tell me about yourself?
Yes.
And then you get a candidate that on paper looks brilliant. You know what? Ahead of time, you've probably even seen their portfolio. You're probably even ready to even hire the person on the spot, but you wanted to go through the interview process just to
Right.
be
Yeah.
good. So you ask this seemingly innocent question, tell me about yourself. And then the interviewee goes on and goes on and it goes on. And 30 minutes later, they are still talking. It kind of
Right.
feels a little
Yeah.
bit awkward because they don't quite know where to stop. And then you, the interviewer, have been letting this person go on for 30 minutes now. And it's even more
Right.
awkward to get the person to stop.
Yeah.
So is this whole is this whole feeling like you're getting more and more awkward and no one knows what to do next?
Right.
I mean, the
Yeah.
reality is that, when you look at once you get to human level stage, in my experience, I'm not sure about yours, but most managers who are hiring managers conducting those interviews, they haven't gone to interview school. No one really.
No.
There's no
No.
such at my time there was no such school. They didn't teach you how to interview well. So
Mhm.
most bosses might be showing up to interviews just after a 1 hour or 2 hour workshop. They have the context switch. All of a sudden, they come here. They're not ready for all the questions they need to.
Right. Maybe they didn't even read your resume.
Exactly. The first time,
I've seen that happen.
yeah. So this is on the hiring manager's end. But then you are the interviewee. If you're listening and you're the interviewee, you want to be able to show up as the best version of yourself. And sometimes, as quieter people like myself or people who don't practice interviews very often, this seemingly harmless question, like tell me of yourself, is one of the most awkward questions to do.
Mhm.
So, how many of you out there listening has what Larry calls the story of you? How do you, in a
Right.
very
Yeah.
succinct way, 3 to 5 minutes or even less, just give people
Right.
an
Yeah.
overview of your career, things that you've done, highlights, achievements, things that you're most proud of? Maybe even share a little bit about who you are as a human being. Because again,
Right.
for as
Yeah.
long as your bosses are humans, your peers are humans, they want to work with people that they like, they enjoy hanging out with.
That's right.
To
Yeah.
this day, we spend so much of our waking lives working. So people want to be able to work with people that they
Mhm.
enjoy working with, that they want to be able to sit side by side or even across the internet, be able to work with together.
Yeah.
So all that, how do you encapsulate all of that in such a seemingly
In 3
harmless
minutes.
question? Like, tell me about yourself, right?
Yeah,
So, and that's
yeah,
the very first thing. And then if you don't get that question right, then it's, downhill from there, maybe for some people. Some people get it back. And then you have the whole topic of how do you share your successes? How do you
right,
curate all
yeah,
of the work that you've done, which will only increase over time? How do you
mhm,
curate the right projects, the right pieces of work that meet what this employee is looking for? How do you talk about it? How much detail do you get into? Where do you start? What are they interested in?
right, yeah,
The one thing I'll say about um, showing your work and deciding what to actually show is you don't know what the role needs. They do. The hiring manager does. They do. So your best shot is to really give people an overview of the things that you've done, your successes in that particular pieces of work.
mhm,
It's kind of like a movie trailer, right? You give them a
right, yeah,
preview. It's short, it's not long. You show them the highlight reel. And then you let the viewer decide, okay, where do I want to go deeper into next? I'll talk about how you did this. How did you do that? How do you tackle that problem? Let them ask those interesting
right,
questions.
yeah,
So your job when you're doing and showcasing your work achievements is to give people an overview, the movie trailer. Let them then once they are interested, let them decide where they want to dive deeper into next. So, I mean, that's a preview of the stuff that we share in the course. Tell me about
right,
yourself, how to
yeah,
talk about your work achievements. We go into many other things. But interviews are hard. They are awkward. You're
yeah,
meeting these people for the very first time. How do you build rapport? How do you do this remotely where eye contact might not really be a thing? How do you do all these things well in such a high stakes environment?
right,
So
yeah,
it's a very natural topic, I suppose, for you and I to actually pick on because I'm sure right now there are a lot of people who are interviewing. Maybe there are a lot of people who are applying for roles, but then you're one of the lucky ones that got to the stage where you're actually meeting with the person you're going
right,
to be
yeah,
working with, and you don't want to fall flat on your face.
yeah. There are so many things I think that more introverted people are good at, which this is exactly what you need to do for these types of things, and that is a lot of deep research, a lot of preparation, a lot of role playing, kinda even with yourself, so I talk about this, when I'm looking at job interviews, even asking for a promotion, is you have to put yourself in their shoes a bit and think, "What do they need? What are they looking for? What do they care about?" And I think this is where people who are interviewing go wrong, is they talk about what they personally care about. It's like, you better remember that the hiring manager or the interviewer is thinking about what matters to them. So, and
Mm-hmm.
I get into this all the time. I'll, give the example of designers. We fall in love, and I was a designer. We fall in love with our craft, at our process, at our tools, and then we are very passionate about it and customer advocacy. And the person sitting across the table is like, did it make money? They,
Mm-hmm.
they care about money. They care about metrics. And I
Mm-hmm.
always have to teach my team, it's like, remember who you're talking to across the table. Think of the interview or
Mm-hmm.
ask for promotion just as you would when you're creating a product. What would you do? Well, you do
Mm-hmm.
customer research. You try to figure out what problems are the customers dealing with. How can I solve their problems? How do I go deeper and understand what the real problem is? Same thing. It's like, take all the skills you have in your job and apply that to this process and think, what does that person across the screen or the table from me want?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that they need? Now, how can I sell myself and talk about my accomplishments and my projects in a way that highlights what they want to hear?
Mm-hmm.
That's super helpful. So, a lot of it is preparation, a lot of it's practice, a lot of it's doing research, which
Mm-hmm.
I know as an introvert, I love doing research and I love
Mm,
preparing stuff and creating stuff. So I think all of that bodes really well for the process that we want to take you through to say, how do you get ready to sell yourself and tell your story? How
mhm,
do you talk about your projects? How do you share the stuff that's important when you're thinking about a promotion, which I think many people get wrong. A lot of people who think about promotions really focus on tenure. And they're
Mm.
like, "Hey, I've been with the company 4 years. I should be getting promoted." And I can tell you, I was a manager, I was an executive, as a vice president, my last role. We don't care about that. That's not what the people who decide promotions care about. They're not like, "Oh, wow, okay, I'm gonna give you a gold star and promote you because 'cause you've been here 4 years."
Mm.
Doesn't work that way. And so you really have to understand, what is it that you should be capable of doing? What's expected of you at that level you're asking to be promoted to? And you should be able to go in there confidently and say, "I do all of that. I'm good at that. I am capable of that. I'm actually doing it right now." And that's how you're selling yourself for the promotion. It's not begging for a promotion, and it's not saying, "Oh, I've been here a long time." So there's a lot of little strategies and tips, and we have scripts that we're gonna share, so trying to make it a little bit easier, templates, things you can fill out. We'll do a lot of live stuff with those of you that come to the course. We want to have you ask us questions. We want you to practice telling your story and
Mm.
sharing it with us. We wanna give you feedback and let you know, which is something AI can't quite do yet. Do you look confident on camera? Do you sound confident? Do you seem happy to be here? Do you seem like you want this job, right?
Mm.
All these little subtle things, it's very human. It's the micro expressions and
Mm.
tone of voice. Um, we haven't talked a lot about it, but we are gonna talk about how you can use AI strategically, the tools and services to help you prepare for your interview, to
Mm.
help you improve your LinkedIn profile, to improve your resume, to use as a partner, to have questions that it would ask you in an interview. So there are a
Mm.
lot of ways that I think AI can help.
Mm.
But the final touch of really getting a human to give you feedback on, does that sound confident? Do I
Mm.
believe you? Do you look like you want to be in this interview? Does it look like you really want this job?
Mm.
That's where the human comes in. And Tim and I have both been managers and hired people and interviewed hundreds of people. So we will be happy to be doing that during the course to give people
Oh yeah.
feedback and help them get better.
You were talking about how to use AI in this hiring process. Just to share one way that you could do that, quite simply, is if you're applying for a role and there's always this huge bias, there's this blind spot that as you're reading this job
Mhm.
description, you say, yes, I can do that. Or maybe, nah, I can't do that. No, I don't do that well. It's a no. But one of the things that you could do is, use take your resume, put it into the AI platform of your choice, take
Right.
the job description, put it into the AI platform of your choice, and then get AI to actually play that unbiased role of looking
That's right.
at these two
Yeah.
documents and name me 10 things that make me a good fit for this role. Name me 10
Right.
things that don't make me a good fit for this role.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And you'll be surprised because, again, we look at our own work, we think our own experience through this lens of bias. It might, interesting things might show up that you probably never noticed or seen
Right. Yeah.
before. And then you could be like, oh, actually, I do have that experience. How is it not in there? I should put
Yeah.
it in.
Yeah.
I should stand out. Maybe it should even be in your cover letter. That's the first thing that you say.
Right. Yeah.
There are interesting things that you can use with AI to your advantage. So, as you were talking, that's the first thing that came to mind. The second thing that came to mind is to realize that what AI has done is it's really lowered the floor. It hasn't raised the
Mhm.
ceiling on the craft that you do. So, I'll explain what that
Right.
means. When Canva came around, everyone was suddenly a designer. Everyone can
Right.
do
Yeah.
greeting cards, they can do.
Mhm.
When Jamie Oliver came around, everyone was suddenly a cook. Everyone can do Italian cooking. No problem. They made it easy. All of a
Right.
sudden, everyone's a designer, everyone's a developer, everyone is the everything person.
Mhm.
But just because you can doesn't mean that what you made was great.
Right.
Because again, great ideas actually take two people. You need someone who have created that great thing. But you also need the other person to have recognized that what was made was great, right?
Right. Right.
Because not everybody needs a Herman Miller chair. Not everyone appreciates the comfort that a Herman Miller chair will actually bring you. Maybe an IKEA chair will suit you just fine. But then that curation, that taste making is a really
Hmm.
important
Hmm.
part of how you can actually differentiate yourself in this age of AI. In particular, AI and the tools that it's giving you right now, they have lowered the floor, made it easier. It's actually lowered the barriers to entry. Every other candidate right now is going to have that in their resume. Everyone that's
Yes.
sitting night after night playing with these tools, that's going to be table stakes.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the one thing that is going to be true today, that is going to be true for as long as your bosses are human beings, is that when you show up for an interview, if you show up and ask for a promotion, the boss expects you to show up, not your AI
That's right.
boss.
That's
Not your
right.
AI boss. You know,
Yeah.
AI is for all the work downstream. It's what you do in your alone time.
Right. It's behind the scenes. Yeah.
When it's boss
Yeah.
time, it's a meeting, your CEOs, your VPs, and they ask you for an update, the report. Imagine if you sent your AI bot to that meeting. Your boss,
Right.
your VPs, they are not gonna be happy. They're gonna
Yeah.
expect you
Yeah.
to show up. And what's gonna happen when you show up and you're gonna put up this nice AI creation that you just made with AI? You're going to need the same skills that people have always needed. The stuff that you mentioned
Right.
before. You need to have executive presence. You need to have public
Hmm.
speaking skills. You need to be able to read the room. You need to be able to tell your stories persuasively. How to convince your boss, how to handle difficult questions as they come up. What to do when these questions put you on the spot. What do you do then? Can you ask your AI to answer it? No, for as long as bosses and decision makers are still going to be human beings, these human skills are still going to be important. So, for everything else that you're hearing about AI, again, remember that it's going to be table stakes because it's so
Right.
easy now to do these things. Yes, I don't dis like I definitely agree. Learning how to use this new tool is going to be very important, but it's going to be so easy to learn. It's going to be hard to master, but then why not
Right.
focus
Yeah.
on all the other skills? Why not focus on all the other skills that are still as important as ever?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. You said something that I wanted to circle back on. I just shared this in a newsletter, I think last week, that people like to hire people they like. And it's
Mm,
not fair. It's biased, but it's true. And it is, I think, because we do spend so much time working together that they would rather work with somebody who's easier to work with than somebody who's more challenging or rude or a really unpleasant person, even if they're better at the job.
mm,
And that happens where it's called the brilliant jerk, right? It's like, they're like, you know what? We don't want any brilliant jerks here because it just demoralizes the team. It makes work harder. And even though they're brilliant, they create so much friction that people are like, I don't want to hire this person. And I've been in interviews where we walked out of the room and debriefed, and they're like, no. They're like, he's a genius. He's got a great background. What a pain in the butt. He's going to be horrible to work with. And we said,
mm,
no, even though probably a top candidate, we're like, nah, we don't need that friction. But
mm,
the people who are engaging and likable, and that's a lot of stuff that just comes naturally to you as a human being. And there are
mm,
things you can do to improve that. And I've talked about that too. It's like there are people who are a little more challenged with this because they're neurodivergent, and the things like looking people in the eye and smiling
mm,
and asking questions of the other person and keeping your answer short. These are all skills you can learn. I've learned
mm,
them. I've done it. It's sometimes fatiguing, but it definitely helps. And so there's a lot of that human touch, I think, that can come to bear because that likability and that decision, there's some stats on this and there's debate about the validity of the timing, but people make their decision about whether they want to hire you or not in the first 3 to 5 minutes.
mm.
So you've got the first few minutes of the interview to make that impression because they've already brought you in knowing your resume and knowing that
Mm,
much to say, yeah, you seem like a good fit. This looks good. And so they're kind of doing the check. Can you really answer the questions? Is your resume backed up by you really knowing the project work you did? Are you somebody who knows how to engage and work with me? Are you friendly? all that is happening in 3 to 5 minutes, which is
Mm,
very, very human, very human. And so
mm,
it is a skill you can learn. And Tim and I talk a lot about this. There are things you can do to engage with the interviewer in ways that immediately build rapport. And there's research you can do ahead of time. And I tell people about this, and they're like, "Really? You do that?" It's like, "Yes, I do," to build rapport. I taught my kids this because they're young people in their 20s and they've been doing their first few job interviews. And I said, research the people you're going to be interviewing with. Find their social media, find their YouTube, find interviews, find stuff that they've written, get to know their personality, get to know their voice, get to know their mannerisms. And if you're somebody who gets nervous meeting new people, this helps because then when you meet them, it won't feel like you're meeting a new person. It's going to
mm,
feel like, oh, I know them. I know how they speak. I know their mannerisms. I know how they smile. It's going to be feeling like, oh, I'm meeting this person for a second or third time. So there are little techniques you can do to prepare that really help you build that rapport and engage with people and be likable. And I wish it wasn't such a huge factor, folks. I wish it was really neutral and objective, but it is not. It just is
mm,
not. There's going to be there's stuff like this that just matters, and it really does. But we can help you with that.
mm. You said a few things that I wanted to pick up on. I think the first thing you mentioned was the word skill. And these things, for a long time, I thought I couldn't do them because I'm me, I'm quiet. I'm just not good at
Right. Right.
socializing.
Yeah.
I'm not good at building relationships. I'm awkward. I'm socially awkward. For a long time, it was tied very tightly to my identity as a quiet person. But really,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
breakthrough for me only came when I started seeing these as skills. It's not
Right.
part of my
Yeah.
identity. These are skills that are separate from me. And skills, the great thing about skills is that skills can be practiced. And with
Yeah.
more practice, you're going to get better and better and better, which is great because then it becomes something that you can work on, not something that you have to work through. You can work on it and get better at it.
Right. Yeah.
It's the first thing that stood
Absolutely.
out. The second thing was around how people make hiring decisions. And I remember when I was an early hiring manager, being a leader for one of the first times. I came from Singapore. Singapore is a very meritocratic society. When you go to school and you get 98 marks out of 100, people ask you what happened to the other two. They don't celebrate their huge win. They're like, what happened to the other two? Why is it not a perfect score? So I kind of took that same lens to when I started hiring people, right? And I said, yeah, okay, we've got to be very objective. We have to look at this person. Can they do this? Can they do that? What were the results? Are the results good? I took that same lens. But where I ended up later in my career is pretty much where I think most hiring managers end up, which is it sounds weird, but you definitely want people that you enjoy working with,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
There's this hard question sometimes people will ask you, given two equal candidates, who do you actually choose to hire? Someone that might be a little bit worse at their craft, but it's really good to work with and works well with the rest of the team? Or do you pick someone that's better at maybe the thing that they do, but then nobody wants to work with them? I mean, it's
Right.
a
Yeah.
very catcher question because truly there aren't any two candidates that are truly equal that way.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think more and more so, what I've come to realize, whether we're willing to admit it or not, we want to think that we make rational choices. But the reality is that we actually make the choice first and then we rationalize the
Mhm.
choice
It's
afterwards.
true. It happens a
So
lot. Yeah.
yeah, so if this is a person you like, that you interviewed well, that you seem to have good rapport with, that's going to be a good employee for you. You're going to start rationalizing your choice, even though,
Yep. Yep.
you don't want to admit that that's what you're doing. Or maybe you only
That
see
that's
that
what the
in
research
yourself.
found.
Hmm.
You're absolutely right. The research, they found the effect was stronger for, you know, managers with a little less experience, and maybe more senior people got better at this, but I think that's not always true. But they make that decision and then they look for confirming evidence. They're like,
Mm.
"Yep, they're good at this." And then something they're not good at, like, "Well, that doesn't matter that much anyway." And so, but if they don't like them, they're like, "Oh, They've only got 3 years of experience. I wanted 3.5 years of experience. Okay, they're no higher. It's so human. We really do try to. We have this confirmation bias, and we want to look for data that supports our conclusion. Um, and so use this to your advantage. This is all, it's psychology and it's human relationships. It's like use it to your advantage. Build a really good rapport right from the start, and that confirmation bias will work in your favor. They're going to be like, "Oh, I like this person. I want to see if
Mm,
there's enough evidence that I want to hire them because I want to hire them." That's like, yeah, this can
mm,
work in your advantage. It really can. And it
mm,
can work for the other things too. Right. Absolutely.
mm,
Like, staying off the layoff list. There's some stuff I'm going to talk about. The ways to stay off the layoff list. I have like 10 things you can do. And some of them are very qualitative soft skills kind of thing. It's
mhm,
about relationships, and it's about being a good citizen of your organization, which matters, right? Are you somebody who adds value to the org, not just do you crank out a ton of work? Um, there's a lot of good things you can do, and we want to help you with that. We want to make sure that you're one of the people that sticks around and keeps your job, gets promoted. We want you to
mm,
be happy,
mm,
That's really what we want. That's why we got into coaching. We want people to enjoy their work and be happy and be rewarded for that. They should. They
mm.
absolutely should.
And if you're one of the people listening to this podcast and you've been unfortunately laid off already, and maybe you're in the process of going through an interview and you're finding it hard to find a role, I think the first thing is that I'll say is that Larry and I, we have both laid off people, but we've also both been laid off before. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
understand how it feels.
Yeah. Oh
It's
yeah.
a it's a very difficult time, if especially if you're listening to this and you are a single income owner for your household, you're the primary income owner, you're the sole breadwinner, and then your bills start stacking up. I think the first thing we'll say is that we understand how you feel. And it's difficult. It's hard. For
Yeah.
those of you who are listening and you're worried that, layoffs have been happening left, right, and center. Um, what do I do? Uh, do I stay at this role? Do I go and look for something else? Do I try and find something else in this company? What should I be looking for? Um, am I going to be next? You know, all
Hmm.
these, all these things that you might be feeling, they're very normal human things to feel.
Yeah.
Having been through it before, the first time you experience this for yourself is probably the time that you still remember. I remember the first time I was laid
Oh
off.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The benefit, I think, what I found over time is that when you have people to talk to, coaches to talk to, peers who are going through those same
Hmm.
experiences that you are right now, um, it's A, comforting, but also B, enlightening. Because you don't feel
Yeah.
so alone anymore. People will see the same thing differently from you. They can give you some perspective. The worst place to be is to be alone and laid off, and all your support network and structures are no longer there for you. That's the worst
Yeah.
place to be. But the truth is, if you actually look out there hard enough, if you actually try to build connections with other people who have been through it, who are going through it, who have seen their own way through, that can actually really help you.
Yeah.
When Larry and I were preparing for this, we met quite a few people. We met quite a few of these people
Right. Yeah.
together, and as we were talking to them, and there were some of these moments where their eyes were lighting up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it wasn't particularly because of things that we were saying. Maybe it's something that somebody else had said, and I can only imagine how people will be walking away feeling so much better or having new ideas of how they can
Hmm.
deal with their current situation. Just being within a group of people and having that shared experience. I
That's
think
right.
the
Yeah.
nice thing about, like, the thing that I've really enjoyed with Larry is that even though we're two very different people, the other thing that you might not know is Larry and I have never met in real life before. for
Yeah. We
all I
haven't.
know, for all I know, Larry might be AI. This might be Larry's AI bot.
Yeah.
I never
Exactly.
shook his hand. I never had a beer with him. I don't even know if he's real, but we've known each other. We've had this connection, even though we've never met before. He makes me laugh. I make him laugh, and we have this rapport, and we try to share this with other people that have come to our sessions together.
Right. Yeah.
um, and we see, and I think there's some magic that happens in this age of AI, where there's still some magic left in human connections. I think that's
Yes.
very
Yeah.
different. So whether it is you're looking for a role, you're interviewing, you're trying to ask for a promotion, but you don't quite know how, if you've been laid off or you're worried about getting laid off, I think there's some sense, there's some really warm, nice human fuzziness and feeling to be in a group of people who are going through the same thing that you are.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit about the course format. So they're going to be live sessions. So we'll have live dynamic coaching Q&A. We'll share material, but we'll also have you present and do stuff and practice with us and ask us questions. We want to keep it live. It's going to be over 2 weekends. So we'll have a 2 hour kind of session on one Saturday. And then we'll have a week where you can kind of go through material and work on some of the scripts and the homework and all kinds of good stuff. Come back for the final 2 hours, and it's live. So it's going to be live with Tim and I. There's going to be other students there, so that's why it's a group kind of experience, and you'll hear each other and you can talk with each other. We'll invite you into a community. So that's the other thing, is that we want you to not have this end, because I know how it goes with courses and workshops where you have all this energy and everything's great and happy, and you can't do everything. There's so much to absorb. And then you go away and you're kind of on your own. You're like, okay, now what? I'm on my own. Where's the help? Where's the accountability? Well, we'll have the community so that you can continue to engage with us and ask us questions on the landing page. So if you go to toovaluabletolose.com, TOO, valuable, TOLOSE.com, you can book a call with Tim and I. So you
Mm,
can book a free call, and it's just a chance for you to talk more with us, ask us questions about us and about the course to see if it's right for you, to kind of get more feedback before you commit. So it's really easy to do that, to book a call with us. Um, yeah, I think it's going to be exciting. We love doing this. We've been doing it. I've been coaching for 9 years. Um, I've been teaching probably longer than that. I did a lot of stuff in the corporate world too. I like talking with people and helping people, and I like this kind of environment where there's dynamic Q&A and feedback and a lot of conversation. We don't want it to be a talking head kind of course, so don't worry about
mm,
that.
mm. Larry, before I think we wrap up, I'm curious. I'm going to ask you a question and put you on the spot. In all the time that you've known me, and we've been meeting each other very often because we're
Yeah,
preparing
yeah,
for
yeah.
this course. I'm curious, what is one thing that you enjoy most about working with me? And then I might go ahead and answer that question first, so you got a bit of time to think about it. I remember when I met Larry for the first time, and we were actually talking about how to handle difficult conversations. And I know through this podcast, when you're listening to it, and maybe through some of other Larry's other work, the thing that I appreciate most about Larry and I like most about Larry is that Larry is scary. Larry is so scary. When Larry wants to stand up and actually defend his team,
Oh,
I tell you, oh my gosh, Larry will turn up. He will be in your corner. He will defend his team. And I
yeah,
think for me in particular, being able to turn that on, being able to have difficult conversations. Imagine you have to stand up against the CEO who has the right and the power to actually let you go. How do you still have difficult conversations? How do you
right.
turn a
Yeah,
no into a yes? The thing that I enjoyed most about Larry, besides him being funny and all those good things, is that he's actually really good at the things that I still struggle with, how to turn that on and actually stand up on behalf of your people, which doesn't come naturally to me. I'm not even sure if it comes naturally to you, but I can tell you, even though I never met you before, and we were kind of like role playing that scenario of having difficult, scared conversations, man, I could feel the hair at the back of my neck standing up. And in some ways, I liked it.
I think it may have come about as I became a parent,
Mm,
and I had my team talk about that. They're like, "You're kind of like our dad. Like you take care of us and you stand up for us and you really care." And even to the detriment of my own career, I would stand up to other executives. So yeah, that is that parenting kind of thing. I think it came through. Um, yeah, with Tim, it's like Tim has this quiet ability to like listen, and you can tell that he's really listening. Sorry. I mean, most people don't. So if you are talking with people, and I had this experience, you can tell when someone's listening, but they're just waiting to respond. They're like kind of vibrating in their seat, and they're not really hearing you. They're just thinking about their response. Tim's different. So like when Tim's listening to you, he's really listening to you, and he's thinking about what you're saying. He's going to come back with an insight that's going to surprise you, and a question, like a follow-up question to kind of probe more deeply into it to get to the bottom of it. And he does. He has his quiet kind of confidence that it isn't screaming, it's not shouting, it's not violent. He's just very quietly confident. And you can tell that he cares. He's listening and he cares and he's processing and he comes back at you with an insight and with a question. And I saw this happen. He was mentioning we were kind of group coaching a few people because they were opening up and sharing the problems they're having in their career. And so it ended up being a kind of a group coaching session. And they were talking and talking, and Tim was just sitting there listening. And you could tell he was absorbing. He came back with this insight and this question. And the guy's eyes like literally widened. His eyes lit up. And he's like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. You're right. You're right. So that's the kind of stuff you get when you interact with Tim as a coach or a friend, and as an instructor in the course. Is he's going to be listening for real, and he's going to come back with an insight that's going to surprise you, and it's going to help you. It's going to improve things.
Mm, yeah. It's weird, but people have always said that maybe it's in my nature, maybe it's just the way that I speak. The truth is, most of the time, it kind of feels like a duck on water. You kind of, it
Well,
looks
you
like
hide it
you're.
well.
But I think it depends on the scenario, it depends on the situation. But I think it's also with age and
Sure.
experience, which is,
Yeah.
I think, one thing that you internalize over time. Over time, you start seeing that there's a pattern. It's the same way that AI works. They do pattern recognition, I believe. That's what they do. The only difference with AI is that they can only ingest knowledge and data that's out there that's actually in a consumable
Right.
format.
That's
But a
right.
lot of the things that I think will still be relevant in the age of AI is a part of the human experience, the things that people find tangible that's human, that's not AI ingestible. It might be a thought, it might be a
Right.
reaction
Right.
and emotion that you're giving off in a way that AI cannot compute, at least yet.
That's
Um,
right. That's right.
and I think those skills are going to be a lot more important in the future. Um, it may not feel as important now as people are starting to see that the floor is lowered. The AI is now the everything tool. But I find
Hmm.
that in a world where everything is the same, where everyone has the same ability, it's the same thing happened, like I said earlier at Canva, when design came out, all of a sudden everyone's a designer. But I think what's going to happen is when everything starts to look the same, everything that's being made tastes the same. Sooner or later, again, same as ever, it is the people who are different that are going to
Yes.
be standing out.
Exactly.
So it depends how you want to be different. And many ways, how you interact with humans is going to be a differentiator for you. And that's going to be key, in my opinion.
I totally agree. All right, folks. Well, there'll be a newsletter associated with this, show notes. We'll have links in that as well. But yeah, check out Too Valuable to Lose. The tickets are still on sale until the end of May 2025. It depends on when you're listening to this. But we're going to close the doors kind of at the end of May because we have to. And then we'll kick off the course with everybody. And I'm sure we'll be doing something like this again, but it may not be for a little while. So I would highly recommend jumping in now while you can and get the benefit of this group coaching and instruction from Tim and I. We'd love to help you.
Can't wait to start.
All right. Take care, Tim.
See ya.